How did people feed themselves through winter before supermarkets? One autumn's harvest had to last until the ground thawed again. Let's find out. My name is Pico. This question has been bothering me for a while. Walk into any shop in the middle of winter. The shelves are full. Tomatoes in January, apples in February, bread that was warm an hour ago. Outside the door, the ground is frozen solid, and none of it seems to matter. Winter, in here, has been switched off. We do this without a single thought. We have taken the coldest, emptiest months of the year and made them completely invisible. But step back a few hundred years to a farmhouse in the north of Europe. And winter is not invisible at all. It is the one thing the whole year has been pointing at. The fields are bare. The ground is too hard to dig. Nothing new will grow for months. And the family standing in that cold kitchen has exactly one thing between them and spring. What they managed to gather before the frost came. One harvest, picked in a few short autumn weeks. It has to stretch across every single day until the earth is soft enough to plant again. There are no shops to run to, no deliveries, no second chances. If the food runs out in February, February is where the story ends. So this is the question that keeps following me around. Not how they grew the food, how they kept it. Somewhere on that farm there is a low wooden door set into a mound of frozen earth. From the outside it looks like nothing, a hatch into the cold and the dark. Whatever carried that family through to spring is waiting on the other side of it. I want to open it. Before I open that door, I need to understand what it was holding back. Because the problem was bigger than one cold night. It was time, months of it. Think about when the main harvest comes in. Autumn, a few short weeks. The roots, the grain, the apples, much of what must carry the family forward. And then the door of the growing year swings shut. The frost arrives. The ground goes hard as stone. You cannot plant into it. You cannot dig much out of it. Whatever is not already gathered is not coming. So the family has a store of food in autumn. And months in front of them with very little new coming from the ground. Not for October, fine. Not for December, harder, not for February, when the store is half gone and the cold still has not broken. And here is the part that surprised me. The danger was not the middle of winter. It was the far edge of it. There is a name for it, the hungry gap. Late winter into spring, March, April, and into May, when the stored food is nearly finished and the new food has not yet grown. That is the real distance. Not autumn to winter, autumn all the way to the other side of spring. Half a year, carried on one harvest. So the question sharpens. It is not enough to grow the food. It is not even enough to grow a lot of it. You have to make it wait. Wait through the frost and the dark and the slow, hungry weeks at the end. Without spoiling, without freezing, without quietly turning to rot while your back is turned. And that is a very physical problem. Where do you put half a year of food so the cold cannot ruin it, and the family can still reach it on the coldest morning of the year? Somewhere, out of the frost, but not too far from the door. So they turned to the earth. Sometimes they dug down into it. Sometimes they built the earth up around the food. Because the ground plays a trick people worked out long before they could explain it. The surface freezes first. But farther down, the temperature changes more slowly. The surrounding earth holds a steady, patient chill. Cold enough to slow decay, but in a well-made store, protected from freezing solid. Today, the deepest reach of that seasonal freezing is called the frost line. It changes from place to place, with the soil, the snow, and the severity of the winter. A cellar sunk into the ground or cut into a bank of earth could use that sheltered temperature. But the simplest store did not always go so deep. The simplest version was a shallow bed in well-drained ground, layered with straw and filled with roots. Turnips, carrots, beetroot, potatoes. More straw went over the pile, followed by a thick skin of earth. In parts of Britain this had a name, a clamp, a long, low mound in the corner of a field, looking like nothing at all, just a swelling in the earth with a whole winter's roots sleeping inside. Others went bigger, a door in a bank of earth, steps down into the dark, shelves of apples, sacks of roots, crocks and baskets along cold stone walls. A room with no light and no fire, kept cold without being allowed to freeze. A root cellar, and on the surface, this looked solved. Pack it in straw and earth. Close the door, walk away, come back in February and eat. That is what I thought too. Surround it with earth, and the cold does the rest. But the people who actually kept these stores knew. It was not that simple. They knew you could do everything right, dig deep enough or cover it thick enough, beat the frost completely, and still lift the straw in midwinter to find the pile warm, damp, sweating in the dark, turning quietly to rot. Something inside the store was not sleeping as deeply as it looked, so I went looking for what was still awake in the dark, and the answer stopped me. The vegetables were alive, not alive the way we picture food, sitting there, inert, waiting to be eaten, alive in the plain, literal sense. A potato pulled from the ground does not switch off. A carrot in the straw is still, quietly, living, and living things breathe. This is the part I keep turning over. A stored root takes in oxygen. It burns a little of its own sugar to stay alive. And, like anything that breathes, it gives three things back: a little warmth, a little moisture, and a slow breath of carbon dioxide. One carrot doing this? Nothing. You would never notice. But a clamp is not one carrot. It is hundreds of them, thousands. A whole harvest, packed together in the dark, each one breathing, all winter, into the same small pocket of earth. And suddenly the warm, sweating pile makes sense. Seal them up completely. Straw, soil, no gap, no opening. And the breath has nowhere to go. The warmth builds. The moisture gathers on the roots like sweat on cold skin. And in that damp warmth, rot moves through the pile like a rumor. The people who kept these stores did not know about oxygen or carbon dioxide. They did not have the word respiration. But they knew the pile could smother itself. They had lifted the straw and felt the heat. And so they did something that looks, at first, like a mistake. After all that work, digging, drying, packing, covering, sealing the harvest away from the killing frost, they went back to the very top of the mound and they left a hole. Just a tuft of straw poking up through the soil at the peak. Small enough to keep the cold from rushing in, open enough to let the pile breathe. And here is the image I cannot let go of, my friend. That little wisp of straw was a chimney. It was the pile's mouth. Everything inside was alive and slowly exhaling. And that one soft opening let the warmth and the wet breath escape, a little at a time, all through the winter so the store could stay cold enough, dry enough, alive enough to still be food in spring. They were not sealing the harvest away. They were keeping it barely breathing. And that is a very different kind of work, tending. That was the work. A store like this was never finished. You did not bury it in autumn and forget it until spring. You visited it, all winter long. On the cold mornings, someone would go out to the mound or down the steps into the dark and check. In the cellar, they could inspect the baskets, feel for damp, and put a hand among the roots the way you would touch a forehead. Outside, they watched the clamp itself, the skin of earth, the drainage around it, the little straw chimney at the top. And whenever the store was opened for food, they checked what the darkness had been doing. And they were looking for one thing above all, the single root that had begun to turn. Because rot does not stay where it starts. One soft potato, one bruised carrot left in the heap, and the spoiling spreads to its neighbours, and then to theirs. One bad root can begin to take the whole store down. So you found it, you lifted it out, you saved the rest, and you closed the store again and came back again through all the weeks of winter. This is slow, unglamorous, endless work. Nobody wrote songs about checking the clamp. But this could be the difference between a store that still held in April and one that failed before spring. And the more I looked at it, the more I noticed something about when this work truly began. Because you cannot save a rotten harvest in winter. By the time the frost comes, much of it is already decided. Whether the roots went in dry or damp, whether the bruised ones were pulled out early, whether the store was built well in the short weeks there were to build it. The winter was survived in the autumn. And that turns the whole year inside out. The calendar didn't start in January, it started at harvest. Everything, the work, the worry, the waiting, bent around those few weeks when the food came out of the ground and the long wait began. Which means the strangest part is this. These families were not fighting winter in the middle of winter. They had already fought it, months earlier, on warm afternoons, with the sun still out and the frost not yet even a thought. So I opened the door, the one from the beginning, the low door in the bank of frozen earth that looked like nothing at all. And now I know what is behind it. Not a freezer, not a shop, just a cold, dark room, and a whole autumn resting inside it. Roots in the straw, apples on the shelf, a store built in the short weeks of harvest, still holding on in February. And if I stand very still, I know what everything inside is doing. It is breathing, slowly, barely, giving off warmth and moisture so quietly you would never notice. While somewhere outside a wisp of straw rises from the frozen mound like the breath of the harvest itself. Food kept alive just enough to reach the spring. This is the world the supermarket made disappear. Not only the empty shelf, filled now with strawberries in January. Something larger. It replaced the deadline. The autumn that decided the winter. The calendar that bent a whole life around a few weeks of gathering. We did not just make winter food easy, we made the harvest forgettable. Most of us could not say when the food we ate today came out of the ground, or whether it ever did. And I am not sure that is a loss, exactly. Nobody misses the hungry gap. Nobody wants to lie awake in March wondering if the store will hold. But I think it is worth knowing that it was ever like this. That behind every full shelf there used to be a door in the cold ground, and a family that opened it carefully, and a pile of quiet, breathing food that someone kept alive, all winter, so that they could too. What everyday object do you want Pico to follow next? Tell me below.